So hello, fellow Earthlings. This is Earthling 6455463728. And this piece is about the time when I fell for some racist interpretation of statistics. Now, I don't know how many of you may have seen it. There was, I don't know if it's a meme or something that was going around on Facebook. Basically, the idea of the meme was that so many more black people attack and hurt white people than white people attack and hurt black people. So, I saw it, I think, maybe a couple of times on the internet or Facebook or wherever, and I just ignored it. And one day I thought to myself, let me just take a look at what this is about. And my opinion going in was that this was just crap. It didn't make any sense whatsoever. I started reading, and basically, they had some statistics. It was about something like violent assaults, I believe it was. Anyway, I will just recite the statistics as far as I remember. And they went something along the lines like this. So for black people, 40% of the violent assaults on them were as a result of other black people. That's what the victim would have stated. And this came from government statistics, okay? I don't know who decided to go after this information and break it down the way that they did. I believe that in the government, whichever body it was that was gathering this evidence, I think they had a particular view that they wanted to demonstrate in the statistics, and I think they did it, even though it was taken and used in another particular way. So anyway, for black people, the amount of percentage of, let's say, attacks from other black people was like about 40%. The amount of violent attacks from white people was, I think, like 22%. And the amount of violent attacks from unknown people was also coincidentally something like 22%. I can't remember what the figures would have been for Latino or Hispanic people. It was a small amount, given that those two already add up to something like 84%. And then when you looked at it for white people, it was that the percentage of people who, of white people that were reported being attacked or assaulted, by black people was something like 15%. The number or the percentage that reported being attacked by white people was like 50%, I believe. And the percentage for Latino was something like 17%. And then for unknown, there was another figure. Now you say to yourself, but wait a minute, Earthling. The fact of the matter is that 15% of these attacks are by black people. That doesn't sound like black people are attacking so many white people. Well, what they did was the number of white people in America is very large. So when you multiply that 15%, you would get something along the lines of like hundreds of thousands of attacks by black people on white people. The number of victims that they would have recorded for black people is a smaller number, much smaller number. So when you multiply that 22% by the amount of actual reports, it might come up to be something like, let's say in the thousands or tens of thousands. So here it is that you have the number of white people that were attacking, or white perpetrators that were attacking black people, was in the tens of thousands or the thousands, and the number of black people attacking white people was in the hundreds of thousands. Now, when I first looked at this, I've done mathematics before, I've done statistics before, but when I looked at those numbers, I was like, wait a minute, there's got to be something wrong here. This doesn't quite make sense. But I thought about it, and there was no denying hundreds of thousands versus, tens of thousands or thousands. So it was like, oh wow, okay. It doesn't make any sense that melanin would affect how violent somebody is, especially since sometimes people can be biracial, and you would not even be able to tell. So you have a brother and a sister who are both biracial, but one of them has fairer skin and would be called in many instances white, and the other one might be considered black. And people would claim that they would be, without knowing how black any of the particular people were, they would treat people in a particular way as to say, yeah, I know that you're okay and you're not. Even though both of you are 50% black, it's just that I can't tell, but that's how I'm going to decide it. But I thought about it and I thought about it and I was like, whoa, this is heavy. I can't believe that I am, seeing this. And there's no other way to twist it. I went looking for the actual government statistics and I found it. As it turned out, I think this was in Obama's era, I believe. And when I looked for it again, disappeared. On the actual website, it was gone. The information was gone. But I had already verified that this was not something that somebody made up. Somebody took like a screenshot and that was real statistics that they got. Eventually, though, I realized something really weird about the information. And basically, it comes down to this. The percentage of black people in America is about 13% of the population. The percentage of attacks by black people on white people was about 15% of the population. The percentage of white non-Hispanic people in America is about 60%, 62%, and the percentage of attacks of white people by the victims, as claimed by the victims, was about 50%. And then I realized, wait a minute, this is exactly in line with their representative population in the population. Black people are not, according to this same statistic, they're not responsible for twice as many attacks as befits their ranking in the population. They're not responsible for 3 times a month. It's pretty much, there are that many black people in society in America, and they're responsible for that proportional amount of crime. So it wasn't anything revealing. It was just people taking these statistics and twisting the information to make a point that was not valid. Now you might say to me, well, look at the other statistics. Fact of the matter is that, it's 22% as reported by black people of attacks on them by white people. And to that, I would say something like, wait, isn't it kind of weird that the exact percentage of unknowns, attacks by people of unknown race, was the exact percentage for attacks by white people? It's almost as if when somebody was attacked by a white person, they just, half of the time, they just said they didn't know what the race of the person was. I mean, that's really what it seemed like. And it seemed like if it is that people, another percentage of people, were to just not even bother to report it, that seems like it could end up close to the percentage of white people in the population. There's a number, let's say, of people who say, yeah, whether or not it's a black person, a white person, I'm going to report it, 22%. There's another number of people who are like, I'm not even going to bother to say the race because nobody believes me. And the reason why I would suggest that something like that is possible is because there was a case where there was I think there's several cases where police officers have assaulted prostitutes or people who were arrested or charged with crimes, and the people, the victims, they didn't even bother to report it. They did not even bother to report that they'd been raped or assaulted or anything, until the cop made a mistake of doing it to somebody who had nothing to fear. That person reported, in the specific instance that I remember, but I remember several other instances, that person decided that, hey, I'm going to report this. And then once they reported it, all these other people decided to report and tell on a particular cop. And I don't think that would ever happen if it was, for example, a black cop and white, let's say, white victims. I think it's very, very unlikely that that would happen. Because, and then there's something called, there's a book called How Not to Be Wrong. I can't remember the name of the guy. But basically, he was saying that when you have any small groups, it's really easy for the statistics to swing one way or another in a large way. So given the significantly smaller size of the black population in America, it's very, very easy for statistics to go awry when you are comparing that with a much larger white or white Hispanic population. I'll give you a simple example. A lot of times when, well, let's see what the example would be. If you have one person on an island and that person dies, 100% of the population dies. But that's not the same as if you have another island with 1 million people and 100% of the population dies there. You can't compare it. Let's say you have 100 people on an island and all of them die or all of them leave. Then you have similarly 100% of the population has died or left the island. You still can't compare that with 1 million people on another island doing something similar. And that's the reason why it doesn't make sense to compare the US with other countries that have significantly smaller populations. I mean, we do it a lot, but it does not make sense. You have to compare like to like, and a lot of times you have to work with a much larger population. Otherwise, your statistics are going to end up getting messed up. And I wanted to just mention this because I think a lot of people don't understand how the world works. And for me, I didn't as well. In America, black people are about 13% of the population, and they represent about 39% of the people in jail. That's 3 times their stake in the population. They end up in jail. And you say to yourself, yeah, well, maybe black people have problems and blah, blah, blah. Right. In Canada, the native peoples represent 2% of the population, and they represent 28% of the population in jail. That's native people. They are far removed from anybody in Africa. If you look at New Zealand, in New Zealand, the Maori people, they represent, I believe, 17% of the population. And they also represent something like 51% of the people that are in jail. If you look at Australia, and I don't have the exact statistics for the native peoples of Australia, the Aboriginal people, but it's a really high percentage as well. If you look at Japan, in Japan there's a group of people who are descended from butchers. And in the Buddhist tradition, these Buddhist people are like unclean. They're not even in the caste system as recognized. And these people are treated really, really badly. And as a result of them, I don't know what their representation is in the prison, but I can say that they represent something like, I think it's 8% of the population of Japan, but 70-something% of the population or the members of the Yakuza. So a lot of times, minorities find themselves in jail. And in the US, it just happens to be black people. But make no mistake, wherever you have minorities, there are people who are out to get them. And they always can find a way to frame it in as being the fault of the minorities. I think, I would have to look up for Irish people, but I bet that they have a higher than average representation based on what people might think of them in England or Britain proper. Anywhere that you have minorities, people don't treat them that well. And I think if you don't understand that, you really should try to appreciate it. Anyway, guys, you can wish me lucks. You can like or unlike. You can comment, subscribe, and or share. And of course, you can do nothing. Peace.